We continue the Shir in Gemara. Last Shir we spoke about the comparison between the non-Jewish court laws and the court laws according to the Torah. Specifically, we spoke about murder cases that, according to non-Jewish law, are judged by a jury of 12 people, and we illustrated how ridiculous the system is here, where it is demanded of the entire jury of 12 to find the person on trial guilty if there are 11 who consider him guilty. 11 is much more than a majority. 11 consider him guilty, and the verdict of one is innocent. It's considered a hung jury, and the trial he's retried, or many times he is allowed to go free. Logically, the rule should be, as the rule in the Torah, that we follow the majority. One point more we wanted to bring out then, too, was the fact that according to non-Jewish law, we find the rule diametrically opposite the Hebrew law, the law of the Torah. Because, according to non-Jewish law, if there are less than 12, which means less than a unanimous verdict, finding him guilty, the person is not guilty. If there are 12, everyone votes alike, he is guilty. According to the Torah, the din is that if you're supposed to have 23 judges, Sanhedrin, and you need a majority of 2, plurality of 2, to find him guilty. That is a majority plus 1. And then he's considered guilty. An additional law, the Gemara tells us, is that if the entire 23 Sanhedrin, all 23 judges, consider this man guilty, the verdict is guilty for him, then he goes free. If all of them find him guilty, if the verdict is unanimous that he is guilty, the Gemara says he goes absolutely free, because the Torah considers those Sanhedrin incapable. The truth did not come out clearly. There should have been a battle among them. There should have been at least one or more who would battle for his innocence. And therefore, if all of them find him guilty, he is free, because that is not the truth. Now, there is a logical reason for this, or not reason. The logical reason that we not go into now, but there's another law that we could understand clearly in conjunction with this one. The Gemara says that in order to be appointed to the Sanhedrin, the rabbis must be extremely learned in every respect, both secular knowledge, Torah knowledge, languages. There are some who have to know 70 languages, and knowledge of the mysticism, magic at that time when real magic existed, and so on. There must also be one at least who is that clever, the Gemara says, that he could prove that a sheretz, a rodent, is not tamei, is not impure. There's a law in the Torah which says, in the Chumash, that a sheretz or a rodent is tamei. He is impure. If he touches anything, that item, that person, or that article of food or garment becomes tamei, impure too. Tamei, that means the person cannot go into the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple, and so on. All the laws of impurity that existed then. But this is a clear sentence in the Torah that a sheretz is tamei. You have to have in the Sanhedrin one or more that is so clever he could prove that a sheretz, a rodent, is tahor, is pure. Now the question is, what's the sense of having someone in the Sanhedrin who is so wise and so clever that he could disprove the word of the Torah? Does such a person exist? Disprove chas v'sholom the word of Hashem. And besides that, you want someone clever, get someone who's very well versed deeply in the knowledge of Torah, rather than one who will speak in opposition to the Torah. What is the gain, what is the benefit of a person with a knowledge attempting to disprove the words of the Torah, and according to the Gemara, one who succeeds in it. Chas v'sholom. We once explained that statement in a different form. If you recall, we said that a mayor had a student who was so sharp and so shrewd that he showed 150 reasons why a sheretz, a rodent, is pure. This showed the sharpness of his mind, the mentality. We explained then that there's a hidden meaning to that. When we speak of a rodent, in this case, we're speaking of a two-legged rodent, spiritually. This means a person who is so evil, spiritually, he's so far from religion, and so much against it, that he could be classified as a sheretz. Now, a tzadik is one who is not fazed by a person's distance, remoteness to faith or religion. A tzaddik's greatness is shown by the amount of effort he can put into working to bring a Russia back to emunah, to faith in Hashem, to mitzvahs. And therefore, this is what's meant by a sheretz that is tummy. Every person would admit that this person, so far, he is completely tummy. There's no hope left for him. And yet, there has to be one who could do it, who could bring him back. Now, there, the Gemara said, this Talmud found 150 reasons. He referred to the power of David HaMelech. King David was so great that he wrote a Sefer Tehillim containing 150 chapters. A person saying Tehillim with kavanah, with heart, putting his whole heart and soul and concentration into it, praying to Hashem, can be assured that this will elevate him out of the lowest depths of despair and evil. So that even the worst sheretz, the lowest human rodent, who has strayed, wandered so far from Hashem, through the saying of Tehillim can be zoched to true tshuva. This case, we're speaking about the requirement of one of the chief rabbis of the Sanhedrin, who has to be that wise, he should be able to prove a rodent pure. When we say a rodent, we mean one that is unquestionably, undeniably, tamei, impure, or, in our case, guilty. Here's a case where you have 23 rabbis of the Sanhedrin. 22 find that the verdict is clearly one of guilt. There's no way for this person to escape his penalty, his punishment, because there's nothing they can find to vindicate him, to exonerate him. He is positively guilty without a question of doubt. If that person is so guilty without a question of doubt, and we're going to have all these Sanhedrin alike, they will all vote, they will all render their verdict of guilty for him, he's going to go out free. According to the law of the Torah, the Gemara, that if all of them unanimously vote him guilty, he's free. Therefore, you must have one rabbi in the Sanhedrin who is so great, he can find a rodent pure. He will battle so and prove that even the worst person, the most guilty murderer, is innocent. Through this, he will save true justice. Justice will prevail, because then the person will be considered guilty in the eyes of the Torah too, and he'll have his punishment, as long as the verdict will not be unanimous. So this is what's meant by the verdict cannot be unanimous, and there must be one of the Sanhedrin great enough to see to it that it is not unanimous. And of course, this too is a very great quality, because the Gemara says we must always seek to find a loophole where a person can be proven innocent. We must make every attempt possible. We'll learn later on more details about how the Dayanim, the judges, strived with all their power to disprove the witnesses came to the trial to find this person innocent. If they erred, if by some chance they proved him innocent when he was actually guilty, they had nothing to fear, because this was their mitzvah. Hashem said, you do your part, and I will take care of the rest. If he is guilty, let him out. He'll die through the manner of heaven. The Gemara tells us further about the rules of the judges in court. For one, we discussed whether it's permissible for a judge to seek a compromise in a case, or whether he must follow the law through to the letter of the law. No compromise allowed. The Gemara says that we decided that you are permitted to accept a compromise between the two parties. But this is only permissible before the judge has heard the claims of both sides. Once he has heard both sides, and he has formulated an opinion in his mind, and he knows what the true decision is, then it would be illegal, it would not be right for him to then allow a compromise, knowing that the compromise is going to go directly against a law which he has already decided. Secondly, the Gemara says that sometimes the judge is faced with two sides coming before him for a trial. One of the two is a very dangerous person, very strong physically, very hot-tempered, and if he is found wrong in this case, it's a case of business, money problems between the two parties, the judge finds him wrong, the judge knows that his life may be in danger. The judge is permitted to send this party off to a second court. But that's, again, only before he heard both sides. Once he has listened to both sides, and he has, again, formulated an opinion, decided upon which one is right and which is wrong, he is not permitted to send this case away. Once he has heard both sides, he must complete the case. The Gemara says there are two types of crimes, sins, that are extremely serious. In order to have justice prevail, there must be honesty on the part of the judge and on the part of the litigants, those coming to trial. It is forbidden for a judge ever to listen to one side alone before the second party comes to the court. Because if he listens to one side alone, his mind may be swayed so that the words of the second party will have no further effect upon him. When both are in front of him, then he could detect through the expressions of both, as one speaks, the expression in the face of the other, as to how true or how positive a statement is. When he is alone with one side, he can then be swayed to a point of no return, and therefore it is a very serious sin to listen to one side before hearing the other side. It's the same sin, of course, on the part of the party who approaches the judge and gives his side of the issue. Here, too, he once mentioned that the Zohar Kodesh, in accordance with this statement, explains this to refer also to a person when he is born, he receives only one of the two angels that accompany him. There's the Yetzer Hara, the evil angel, Satan in a person's heart, the evil inclination, and there is the Yetzer Tov, a good angel that suggests, that assists him to decide in the affirmative for mitzvahs, the negative against averos, against sins. A person receives the Yetzer Hara, it is injected into him at the time of birth. The moment the child is born, he is born with this Yetzer Hara in him. The Yetzer Tov does not enter into a person until he is 13 years old. Now, if a child, until the age of 13, conducts himself properly, it will help him a lot in his future life. And the child should be taught this din specifically. This is what the Zohar Kodesh says. A judge is forbidden to hear one side until the second party comes to court too. So the child should be taught, if you are being persuaded by only one side, the Yetzer Hara, while the Yetzer Tov is not there yet, it won't come until you're 13 years old, don't pay attention. Don't listen to this one side. Because the The Gemara says this is the same person who does so is an evil Russia, a sly evil Russia. The word sly, Aharon, is used in the case of the snake who induced Chava to eat from the tree of wisdom. And this snake became later the Malach HaMavis. He was transformed into the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, and the Yetzer Hara, the Satan. So this refers to, it hints at this point, that listening to one side before the second party comes, it is the sin of the snake, which means that this child is being approached by this snake who is offering this advice, this evil advice, which should be rejected until the second part of the Yetzer Tov comes in. Also, the Gemara says that if you have a case come before a rabbi in a yeshiva, a rabbi, of course, who is authorized to deal in judging cases, and in front of this rabbi is sitting his students, who are well-versed, well-learned, but they cannot render any decisions in front of their rabbi. It's forbidden. And they see that their rabbi is making a mistake, that he is finding the wrong party innocent, the wrong one guilty, then they must intercede on behalf of the innocent party. This must be done in a respectful manner, but they must speak up. They're not supposed to remain silent. They can say it respectfully, questioning the rabbi, isn't there a law as follows, which may prove this party innocent instead of guilty? This they must do because the Torah says there is no respect higher than the respect of Hashem and the word of Hashem. The word of the Torah, the Din Torah, must be upheld at all costs. Then, finally, the Gemara says that the people who come before the court, those who come for trial, and the witnesses should all know that they are not facing just the judges. They are standing before Hashem. As the posek says, Ki Kim Nitzov Ba'adas Kel, that Hashem is present at the time of a court case being tried, and they should know in front of whom they are standing, and be very fearful about telling an untruth. Same time, too, the judges should be filled with a great fear of Hashem, lest they make a mistake in this trial, lest they find they arrive at a wrong verdict. And if a judge says, if so, what's the use of being a judge? Why should I risk my neck? As for sure, I'm coming to a wrong verdict right before Hashem, I'll be punished for it myself later on. Here the Torah says that the judge is supposed to try a case honestly, according to what his mind, his eyes, his ears dictate. If he is pure and honest and sincere about it, even though the result is completely wrong, against the din, that is, against the truth, he found the wrong party guilty or innocent, Torah says the judge is completely free. There is no charge against him from heaven. He has discharged his duty perfectly, as long as he tried his best. According to his knowledge, he was authorized, he put every effort into finding the truth, and then he comes out completely clear. Now the Gemara says we go to a different type of trial. This is much more serious than any mentioned until now. And this is very fitting to speak about here. The Gemara says people tend to forget. We speak about trials, they think this happens to only a few people. Some have never entered a courtroom. Some never had any kind of a crime committed or any kind of litigation where they were required to come to court either as a party in the trial or as a witness. The Gemara reminds us that every person, without exception, is going to have to enter a court. a much more awesome court than we have here. Speaking about the heavenly court, at the moment, the second of a person's passing away. At that moment, the person must stand trial in heaven. And here the Gemara prepares us what to expect. The Gemara says that the first item on the agenda, the first thing for which a person is judged in heaven, is the question of the study of Torah. Did you put every effort into studying Torah, or did you try to evade the study of Torah? It's like saying to a child, did you go to classes today, or did you play hooky? Same thing happens to an adult, to a grown person, who had the opportunity to study Torah, to come to a shiur, study by himself. Whatever he was capable of, this refers to his own ability. He's able to study Chumash, he's required to study Chumash. He can study Gemara, or still higher, he's judged according to his requirements, but as to how much time he put into it. Did you put the proper amount of time into the study of Torah? And this is the first thing, first item for which every person is judged. Now, Tosfos asks a question on this, because this appears, it seems to contradict a different Gemara we learned in Shabbos, Masechta Shabbos, which says, when a person comes before the heavenly court, he is asked a series of questions. And the first question he is asked is, Nasosa v'nasata be'amuna. Did you do business, whatever business you were in, whatever trade you were in, did you do this with true faith in Hashem, and did you deal in truth with your fellow man? Second question asked is, did you study Torah? Now there the Gemara says very clearly the second question is, did you study Torah? Whereas here, the Gemara refers to it as the first question, the very first thing he's judged for. The answer is, it is true that the first question asked is, did you conduct your business in conformity with emunah, with faith? That is the first question, because that is asked of a person who is old enough to be in business, who has had a chance to study Gemara when he was younger, and therefore he's asked now that you know the rules according to the Torah, did you live according to those rules? Then, when the questioning period is over, the Gemara stresses here that if the person is found lacking, if he's found wanting, if he's found guilty of not having spent enough time in the study of Torah, the first thing he is judged, punished for, is his failure to spend the proper amount of time for Torah. That's the very first item he's punished for, which means this is the item that in heaven they are most particular about. And therefore the Gemara advises us that think carefully, see to it that your time is spent wisely. Don't waste your life away, because you have to pay for this time. Hashem granted you life for a purpose, for a mission. The most important, greatest accomplishment you can do with the life given to you is the study of Torah, and you will be asked there, be punished there for the lack of the study of Torah, and therefore be wise and spend the time properly on Torah. Of course, the second question arises automatically. The Gemara says very clearly that women do not have the requirement, do not have the compulsory law of the study of Torah. It's a mitzvah for women to study Torah too, but they're not compelled as men are. Now, if so, does this statement apply to women? Will the question be asked of a woman, and if it is found she does not spend that much time in the study of Torah, will she be punished too? The Medrash says very clearly that this rule applies to men. But women are not exempt from judgment. For them, it is stated clearly that their first question, or rather their first judgment, punishment, is for their major law that applies to women. And that again is the mitzvah of tznius. Tznius means the manner of dress of a woman. Torah requires, demands, that a woman, every Jewish woman, regard herself as a member of royalty, the royal family, and as royalty to dress in accordance with that. That which would be considered right, proper, for a Jewish queen. And here the Torah gives us the guidelines, the necessary length of clothing. For example, dress past the knee, not to wear men's garb, which means that nowadays slacks would be forbidden. Though we find, very sadly, I must say very sadly, in some cases there are certain statements given out by rabbinical semi-authorities that tend to permit the wearing of slacks. Those statements are definitely an error. If you study carefully the Aharon, rabbis of the Shulchan Aruch and Yeridea, you will find that this is definitely not only forbidden, but certainly not at all within the guideline of tznius. Of course, the length of the sleeve, we once mentioned that it's like the mitzvah of tefillin. Length of the sleeve corresponds to the mitzvah of tefillin. And the covering of the hair after a woman is married. This is the first, most vital problem that a woman is confronted with, and for which she will have to stand trial later on. Midrash tells us some very serious types of cases where they were lacking. At the same time, the Gemara tells us, Gemara Yuma, about a woman called Kimchis. Kimchis was a woman who was so pure that she said she had sons, more than one son, and imagine the pride of a mother who can say, my son is a very important official. My son is the Kohen Gadol, the highest Kohen in the Beis HaMikdash who enters into the Holy of Holies. Well, this Kimchas had more than one son, and she was zoche, not to have nachas, this pleasure from one son, but every one of her sons at one time became a Kohen Gadol. Of course, one is the permanent one, but if he is incapacitated temporarily, his brother takes over. To have each one of her sons having served as a Kohen Gadol, 7 sons, this was so great a zechus, it never happened prior to that the rabbis at that time approached Kimchis and asked her, how could you have been so deserving? What mitzvah did you do so great to deserve so much nachas, such great kavod, honor for your children? And she answered that I not only was dressed tznius outside, but even the walls of my home, when I was alone in a room, the walls of my room never saw me dressed in a manner that was not tznius. So careful was she. This is not expected from the normal type of behavior in women to this extent, although, of course, it's commendable when it's done to a better degree than required. But certainly the laws of tznius are such that they cannot be compromised on. And they are so serious that the Gemara says this is the first item for which a woman is judged in the heavenly court. Now, as far as men are concerned, of course, again, the most important item is the study of Torah. Now, the study of Torah itself, we have to understand, in studying Torah, you're not doing any mitzvah at all. You're not putting on tefillin, you're not fasting, you're not davening, and you're not eating kosher. You're doing nothing but just reading. And yet this is more important than the carrying out of all the mitzvahs that are written in the Torah. And that's because without the knowledge of Torah, and without the words of Torah to inspire, to instill in a person the fear of Hashem, the respect for Hashem, the respect for the Torah, without that study, he could never get to the point of fulfilling, of carrying out, of abiding by, adhering to the mitzvahs of the Torah. So the first step to mitzvahs is a study of Torah, and therefore the first item he is judged on is the study of Torah. Now the Gemara gives us a series of proverbs. We rarely find that in the Gemara. This we find usually in the Ksuvim, book of King Solomon. But there are times when the Gemara comes out with these short statements, something like Rabbi Arizal's short statements. First, very briefly, a series of proverbs. One, the Gemara says that when there is an argument, a conflict between two people, and they become enemies because of a certain difference of opinion, it begins at a very low scale. If allowed to continue, it will erupt into a major battle. It is like a dike with a tiny hole in it. The water will not come flooding through. But if that hole is not repaired, it will widen and spread. It will cause a complete flood. And therefore the advice is that when an argument begins, be sure to settle it before it becomes serious, because afterwards it will be very difficult to cut out this cancerous item which could erupt and destroy the peace between two people, two families, or even two countries. He says further that if a person is insulted, that's the first step in an argument. If he's insulted and he listens to his insult, he does not lose his temper, ashrei to that person. Lucky, blessed, fortunate is he. Because by doing so, aside from the fact it's a mitzvah, not to retort in case a person is insulted, we're speaking now about the physical end of it, he is going to save himself 100 different aggravations. Because if he would retort and the argument would spread, would go into a higher level, he could lose in 100 different manners. By keeping silent, remaining silent at this time, letting it pass over him, he'll have no further problem or no further trouble. Because even if you win the argument, you have still lost. You have still gained an enemy. And therefore, ashrei to that person who's wise and does not retort and lets the argument dissipate completely. The next statement the Gemara says that, very wise statement as a warning, that if you see a thief who goes out and steals, is successful, he goes out again, returns to his trade, steals again, and you begin to wonder what an easy means of livelihood it is. Here you work for $2 an hour or for $100 a week. Here's a thief who in 1 hour's time can make thousands. Isn't he fortunate? The Gemara says, rest assured that this thief will get away with it once, twice, 3 times, but the end of that thief is the noose. He will end up being hung for his crimes. Do not envy the thief, because the end will be punishment for him. So stay away from that illegal trade. It's very wise before a person falls into it. Next statement, again, the Gemara says that a person who likes peace, who seeks peace, will be saved from 7 pitfalls. The one who is evil and refuses peace will fall into the very first pit that he comes to. The posek Sheva Yipol Tzadik Bekom. Tzadik comes to 7 different types of traps, and he is saved from them, whereas a Rasha, meaning one who is against peace, against shalom, falls into the very first one. The next statement is, the Gemara says that if you were at court, you were at a trial, and the judges found you wrong, you had to pay. They took your coat away, the trial is over. You had no money, they took your coat instead of money. You walk out into the cold air without a coat. What should you do? The Gemara says, walk along singing a very happy tune. because at least you know that you have been rescued from the sin of gezel, of stealing. If you had not gone through this trial, you'd be wearing a coat that's not legally yours, meaning the amount of money that you legally had to return would have remained in your possession, and now this trial has saved you from this sin of theft. Be very happy though you walk out without your coat. You want next next statement, which here we find a comparison in the Torah itself. Speaking about two people who are infatuated with each other. A husband and wife, for example, very happily married. The Gemara says that when their affection is very strong, to a very high degree, then they do not need luxuries. They can lie together on the sharp edge of a sword, both on the sharp edge of a sword, and be very comfortable. But if there sets in a dislike for each other, if that affection is gone, they can have a bed that's 60 feet wide, and they'll find it too narrow for them. They're not comfortable in that bed. The Gemara says we find a comparison to this case. Kaviyachol, we can use a statement, the Gemara says, that in the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, that one small room in the Beis HaMikdash, the Aharon, the Holy Ark, is 10 Tvachim, 10 Amos. The whole room is 20 Amos. It's like 40 feet. The ark itself was so narrow, comparatively, that it was one of the narrowest items in the Beis HaMikdash. Now, this small place, this holy ark, was the resting place for the Shekhinah, the Spirit of Hashem. When did this take place? When the Jews were loyal to Hashem. The Jews were considered the Kala, the bride, Hashem the Chassan, and when this marriage was in a happy stage, the Shekhinah rested with the Jews very comfortably in this narrow confines of the Aharon, the Kodesh Kodeshim. When the Jews turned away from Hashem, Hashem said through the prophet Yeshayahu, you see these heavens, all the heavens you see, they are only my throne. This entire globe, the earth, is my footstool. How are you going to build a home for me on earth if all you see is so small compared to me? Why suddenly was there no room? Because the affection was gone. When the Jews returned to Hashem, there is Kaviyachol at Tzimtzum. Hashem confines himself, Kaviyachol, into the Beis HaMikdash. More so, even more so, how tiny is a person's heart? So small, so infinitely small in comparison, and yet if a person's heart is pure, Hashem says the lave of a person becomes the Mishkan, the resting place for the Shekhinah, Kaviyachol. When the heart is pure, pure means it is filled with yira, fear of Hashem, and ahava, love for Hashem. That ahava is returned mutually by Hashem, and Hashem places His Shekhinah within the confines of the heart. The Gemara says that to be a judge is no simple task, because there is a danger of making an error, a mistake, even if it's only a matter of money. And therefore, Rav Huna said that when I have a trial come before me, I usually call 10 other rabbis with me. And I say, let's all judge this trial together. You need only 3 rabbis for a trial as judges, but you are allowed to have as many more as you wish to arrive at a clearer conclusion. And discussing it together, consulting with each other, they can surely arrive at a true conclusion. Aharon said, let me have 10 more with me, so just in case we make a mistake, it's easier to divide the blame among 11 rather than take it upon myself. Same thing, too, in case of, Rav Ashi said, in case a woman came to him with a question, the chicken, is it kosher or not? Or a butcher came with a question about an animal, a question of kashrus, tarfus. Sometimes you might look at it, consider the item unkosher, and you've robbed a poor person of their possession. Here's the case of a poor person. He has just a couple of chickens, or he has 1 cow. He slaughtered this cow. You consider it unkosher. The person has lost his entire possession for this decision, which is a wrong one. Or worse, or just as bad at least, if the item is unkosher, and through error in knowledge of law, error through arriving at the verdict, the decision, you say that the item is kosher. So you're causing this person to eat treif. Therefore, Rav Ashi said, in a case like that too, I call upon a group of 10 other rabbis with me. Let's all carry part of the burden, so not one has to take the entire guilt. Of course, as we said, it is true that the judge can only judge according to what he sees. In cases of kashrus, it's not enough. He has to be so completely versed in law that he must be extremely cautious never to come out with the wrong decision. If there's any doubt whatsoever, he must delve deeper and deeper into this case until he has arrived at what he is positive is the true decision, kosher or otherwise. The Gemara says that appointing judges means appointing a judge, or even the case of a rabbi in a shul, in a community. We find a sentence in the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 Commandments, which says, Hashem says, do not make with me Elokei Kesef, Elokei Zahav, idols of silver or idols of gold. These are the words in the Aseres Hadibros. The Gemara says, if you take those words literally, it means that you're allowed to make idols of wood. The sentence says only idols of silver or gold. Therefore, this sentence refers to something else. The reason that the Torah includes the word kesef, zahav, silver and gold, is to teach us that if you accept or appoint a judge to a position because of a bribe, because he paid a certain amount of money to get to this position, politically or otherwise, that is considered the sin of appointing, of creating, building idols, gold or silver. This gold or silver is tainted. It's unkosher money which has bought for you this false leader. Because above all else, the Jews are guided by the words of Torah, for which they must have a mora derech, a mora hora. They must have rabbis and teachers to guide them, to teach them, to enlighten them as to the teachings of the Torah. And that's what Rabbi Arizal says always. Above all else, a person's main striving in life, his main goal in life should be to try to reach the tzadik emes. Never say, I have acquired a rabbi who knows more than I do, and that's sufficient. Strive always to get to the tzadik emes, the holiest tzadik, because through the tzadik emes you will find the deepest truth, the emes la'amita, the final truth in the words of the Torah, and you'll be led to greater and greater heights in the true service of Hashem. Let's hope, strive for that emunah shlema, that ishtadlus, seeking out the truth. That means that when you do find the tzaddik emes, to have the true emunah in him. because the emunah v'tzadik emes is bound with emunah in Hashem. And with that emunah will be certain of being zocher to the brachos of the Torah, blessings of Hashem. We'll see with our eyes the coming of Mashiach Tikenu, Binyan Beis Hamikdash, and Heida B'Yameinu, Amen, B'Yamein. Amen. We continue the Shir in Gemara. We're discussing the dinim, laws of Sanhedrin or Dayanim, the laws of judges, and these laws pertain to court cases today too. A person has a problem, a court case, the Gemara says that it is imperative for a Jew to go to a Jewish court consisting of 3 rabbis. It is definitely sacrilegious, a very serious sin to go to a non-Jewish court if this item can be solved among Jews. However, the Gemara warns the Dayanim, the judges, must be extremely honest. No taking sides, and naturally no taking bribes. As the Gemara tells us, shochad, meaning bribery, is called shochad because it stands for 2 words, shehu chad, because the judge becomes one, united with the side he took the bribe from, which is naturally sinful, and a judge like that is absolutely pasul, completely unreliable and unauthorized to accept any cases in court. The Torah tells us how far this item goes. Rav, the chief rabbi of Syria, the chief rabbi of the Gemara at his time, had a place where he was staying, and his host came before him to present a trial with his opponent. And Rav did not recognize him, and then this host said to Rav, don't you recall that I'm your host? I did you a favor? So Rav said, yes, I do. I recall now. The host said, well, I have a trial now. I want to come before you with this case. So Rav said to him, I consider myself invalid to accept this case. I cannot be the judge in this case, because as long as you mention the fact you did me a favor, deep within my heart I'm going to feel that I owe you a favor in return. I will not be able to render a proper verdict, and therefore you must go to a different rabbi. I cannot accept this case. We see how far Rav was careful, cautious. Though he knew he'd deliver an honest verdict, yet perhaps subconsciously he might be led to favor his host, and therefore he would not take the risk of being the judge in this case. And so the host went to Rav Kahana, one of Rav's top students, who was also a judge. And Rav told Rav Kahana, go take this case. You be the judge in this case. Otherwise, of course, Rav Kahana could not be a judge. He's not allowed to accept any questions in Hebrew law in the presence of his rabbi. But here Rav authorized him immediately to become a judge in this case, and so Rav accepted it. During the trial, Rav Kahana saw this person was feeling very high, very happy, because he felt that he had connections. Rav Kahana said to him, be careful. If you are obedient, you behave yourself properly, good. If not, I'll take Rav right out of your ear. That's a phrase, a term, meaning that I'll put you in cherem. It's a type of curse, as for shalom, which could make a person completely impotent. But so serious was Rav Kahana acting as judge, he told him, you can accept no favors from me whatsoever. The fact that you know Rav means nothing. Rav sent you to me just for that reason. The Gemara says there's a posek, kakoton kagodol tishmol. The judges must take care of a case, whether it is small or big, in the same vein. Meaning that if the case entails a question of one single penny, it must be taken care of with the same consideration and the same depth as a case dealing with $100 or much more even. You are not supposed to differ between one and the other. The same principles apply to both. The Gemara asks, well, naturally, why tell us that? It's understood. You must use the same guide level for a penny as for $100 or more, because you must deal according to the laws of the Torah. The Gemara answers, that's understood. This implies that even if you have two cases in front of you, one of them is a case that runs into a lot of money, there's a lot involved, and so each person is much more interested. And one is a case of only one penny. You cannot take the case of the large amount before the case of the small amount if it was a turn for the trial of one penny. Both must be considered absolutely equal. Then the Gemara says, "Hamishpat v'lokim hu." The judgment belongs to Hashem. The final judge is Hashem. The Gemara says that Hashem is very angry about this. He's a judge, meaning that these evil ones, the judges who are dishonest, or those people who are dishonest and can fool a judge at times in court, they bring false evidence. Not only, says Hashem, that they take money from one that's illegally taken, but they also bother me. Because now, Hashem says, I have to do what is justice. I must see that the money is returned to the righteous party. Now, if a person was fated to make a certain amount, the second person was fated to make a certain amount, and one took money illegally from the other, Hashem has to completely change the stars, situation of the stars in heaven. Fates must be changed, must be altered, so the money goes back to the righteous owner. And this type of additional work, changing the entire heavens around because of this person who committed an illegal act, makes Hashem angry. That's why the Torah says, "Hamishpat Elokim hu," judgment is Hashem's. Hashem will judge righteously, but will punish those who committed these wrongdoings. Now, just for a moment, let's analyze this entire item. We're speaking about court cases. In just about all court cases, one person is innocent, the other person is guilty. One person is righteous, and the other party is a thief. And the question is, let's find out what is the basic cause of a person committing a crime. What is the primary motive that leads a person into crime, to committing theft, whether it's a minor crime or a major act? We can see this from a din in the Gemara. The Gemara says there is a posek, kabed savicha v'yasimecha. You should honor your father and mother, and ish imo v'yaviv tiro. You should fear, respect parents. The Gemara explains what is the difference between honor and fear. Honor, of course, means to be obedient and to serve them, to serve anxiously. There's a big difference between a case where a mother, for example, says to a child, "Please run an errand for me." And the child says, "Certainly, mother, in just a minute, as soon as I complete what I'm doing." Or the case of a child who drops everything and runs to fulfill the wish of the mother. One is honor and obedience. The other is obedience without honor, because that child places the item that he is occupied with above the mitzvah of respecting a mother. What is meant by fear? Fear does not mean literally fear. Fear means respect. To show a reverence to a parent. Here we have specific laws. For example, it is very strictly forbidden for a child, son or daughter, ever to sit in the chair that is designated for a parent, father or mother. It is very strictly imperative, incumbent upon a child to rise when a parent walks in through the door. This is something that very sadly is being neglected in our time. Generation previously, children were taught what is meant by giving respect to a parent, and just as it is a strict law to stand up when a Sefer Torah is taken out of the Holy Ark, exactly the same level it is to stand up for a parent. The parent enters a room. There is no excuse, no pardon for a child who fails to do that. Unless, of course, the parent excuses the child, because Av Shemochel al Kvodo Kvodo Mochel. Father can forego the honor that is due him. But even then it's up to the child to try to evade this second order, because he is being deprived of a mitzvah. A mitzvah is priceless. The reward for it is priceless and everlasting. So if a father says, "Don't stand up for me," the father is actually depriving this child of a mitzvah. It is a mitzvah to obey this order too. But this is a one-time order, whereas each time he would stand up, it would be like picking up a treasure. This is the mitzvah of a child to a parent. The Gemara says in Kedushin that by the same token, it is not the child that owes the parent a duty only. There are rules which a parent is bound, in which a parent is bound to help the child too. A mitzvah, a command, one that the parent cannot evade either. For example, the father is required to bring up the child, to teach the child Torah. Chayev other than Lamda Torah. The father is required to see to it that the child is married properly. And then, third, the din says, the father is required lelamdo omnis, to teach the child a trade. And the Gemara asks, we could see the importance of teaching a child Torah, because Torah will instill in a child respect for Hashem, and also respect for mankind too. We can see the importance of selecting a mate that is fit for the child, because the son or the daughter's entire life depends upon the type of mate, one that is compatible, one where they live in harmony. What is so important about teaching a child a trade? And the Gemara says, because if a father does not teach a child a trade, then it is as though he is teaching that child to steal. Ki'ilu malamdel listus, as though he's teaching the child to go out and commit crimes. What is the reason for that? Obviously, because every person must make a life of his own. Each person must see to it that he is able to provide. We're speaking, of course, about sons, not about daughters. Housewives do not need a trade. They're occupied enough. But a son who expects to have a family of his own is required to provide for that family. He cannot sit back and say, my livelihood will come by itself. He must go out and provide for his family. Now, if that son has a trade, then he is insured to a degree that he can earn a livelihood. If the son does not have a trade, that, the Gemara says, will lead to crime. If he cannot earn a living, he'll have no other alternative but to go out and steal when he becomes desperate. Now, let's take those words carefully. Let's analyze the words in the Gemara. Every word in the Gemara counts. The wording there is lelamdo umnis. He does not give him a trade. He does not bequeath upon him. His son does not inherit it. It says lelamdo, to teach him, which means that a trade must be learned, which means, the Gemara tells us, that there's nothing more important than an education. In order to have a trade, in order to be able to earn a livelihood in a kosher manner, a legal manner, he must have this necessary education. Now, this education, again, very sadly, shows the foolhardiness, the foolishness of those who drop out of school, considering it unimportant. Those college dropouts, and much worse, the high school dropouts, who consider an education of no importance, these are ones that inevitably will turn to crime, of a degree. Not everyone, of course. And actually, you cannot use the time-worn cliche about a person who is a millionaire, never went to school, and doesn't even know how to sign his name to a check. In the first place, that case is so rare that it deserves to become a cliche. In the second place, even that person, if he exists, would be much more respected by people if he did have an education. They would not laugh behind his back. So the first and primary rule is to be educated and thereby to be insured to a degree. Of course, there's no 100% insurance, but his opportunities will be far greater with an education than without. One step further, the Gemara says there is a machlokes, a debate between Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal and Rabbi Yishmael. Shimon ben Yochai Zal is the author of the Zohar HaKadosh. He is considered in the Gemara as one of the greatest rabbis that ever lived, the greatest student of Rabbi Akiva, whose word is sacred. His word is law above all, as the Gemara itself says. All the rabbis respected Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal as far above them. Yet in this case there is a debate. The posek says, "V'yasafta digoncha." You should collect your harvest, work in the field. Work in the field means if you are a farmer, work in the field. If you're a businessman, work in a business, and if you're a tradesman, work at your trade. Meaning, you must earn a living through work. The Shimon ben Yochai Zal says, there is a posek leyomish teida hazemi picha. You are not allowed to ever stop, to cease learning even for a moment. Day and night, a person must occupy himself with the study of the Torah. This is a rule for every Jew. No person has a right to fulfill the posek v'yasafta digonecha, go out and work and earn a living. The Gemara asks, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal, what does he do with that posek? What about that sentence? He answers, that sentence means that if you sit down and study Torah regularly, your work will be done for you through others. You'll be zochet to receive money through various channels that Hashem will grant you. It'll be done by others. You sit and study Torah. Rabbi Yishmael argues, disputes this point, and says, I absolutely disagree, because I maintain, Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz, a Jew must study Torah, but he must have derech eretz, in this case meaning a means of earning a livelihood. Yosafta digonecha means you must do it yourself. Otherwise, you will fail both in earning a livelihood and in the study of Torah. The little bit of Torah that you expect to gain will be lost entirely because you'll be left without an income. The Gemara says now that we have this argument, what is the result? Mind you, this result stated in the Gemara is nearly 2,000 years old. Times have become much worse since then as far as the desire for the study of Torah, and yet, if this statement is made then, imagine how it applies today. The Gemara says, Harbe, there are many people who followed the edict of Rabbi Ishmael, meaning that they studied, they went to work, and they participated in the study of Torah too. And the also biyadam, they succeeded. They had a good life, physically, monetarily, and spiritually. They succeeded in business, they made a good living, and they maintained the study of Torah consistently. Harbe asuk Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, many attempted to follow the words of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Zal. The lo also biyadam, they did not succeed at all, neither monetarily nor spiritually. They had to drop their studies and were left without a means of livelihood. And this, the Gemara says, because we find a statement that Shev Shni Hava Kafna, there were 7 years of famine that took place. 7 years of famine means there was a depression. People could not earn any money, they were jobless, and the abova devei umna lechalfi. But this famine did not touch the door of one who was educated in a trade, which means that even in the worst times, an education is very handy and very necessary. Now, this is what the Gemara means by the lamdo umnis. A lamdo means that a child must learn. It's the duty of a parent to see that the child learns. A child must learn a trade. A child must acquire an education so that his future life will be a secure one. Without an education, a trade is not a tool that is secure. With an education, a person has a much firmer chance to succeed throughout his entire life. Now, again, there are exceptions. Even today, there are few, very few, who do sit and study Torah day and night, who do not work at all, but they number very few. I'm certain that none of us can fit into that category. There are few who have no education and perhaps succeed in business too. But we cannot allow ourselves to rely on so tiny a minority. It is unquestionable and certainly well proven that a person with an educational background stands a better chance of earning a living and above all earning respect in society than one who is uneducated. This is not a non-Jewish law, constitutional law. This is a statement in the Gemara itself. And therefore each person should take that to heart, because remember that if the entire future life depends on it, this means that the entire family life depends upon it. Yes, there's nothing, the Gemara says in R Zohar, there's nothing that can cause as much friction in married life than the lack of money. If there is not enough money brought into a home, no matter how well a couple live in harmony, if there is no food put on the table, then there must be friction, there must be a rift between the two, the harmony is broken. So that the first step for a person to ensure himself a harmonious life in marriage is to see that he is equipped, education-wise, monetarily, to support a family properly. And this is what the Gemara says here. The cause for all these court cases is because there is a person who is dishonest and led to this dishonesty, to the committing of these crimes, due to a lack of income because of a lack of education. Now we come to an interesting discussion about the calendar according to Hebrew law. Again, of course, this pertains to judges. We'll see how soon. First, let's study the calendar, the difference in calendar between the Hebrew manner of determining the days of the year, the months of the year, and the non-Jewish manner. The Hebrew year is called a lunar year, meaning that calendar is conducted according to the months of the moon, the lunar orbit around the earth. The non-Jewish calendar is called a solar year, which means that their year is judged according to the sun. Both years have 12 months, but there is a difference between the two, because the lunar month contains exactly 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 1,080ths of an hour. It's about 44 minutes. This 1,080ths, to make that clearer, there are 1,080 chalakim to an hour. A chalik means 3 1/3 seconds, meaning there are 18 chalakim to a minute. The Torah does not consider seconds. They consider chalakim, which means we have days, hours, and chalakim. 24 hours to a day, 18 chalakim to an hour. That is 1,080 chalakim to an hour, 18 chalakim to a minute. Now, as we said, the month, lunar month, is 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalakim. The lunar year, therefore, 12 times that, is exactly 354 days, 8 hours, and 876 chalakim. Note, 354 days, 8 hours, and chalakim is less than the solar year. Solar year, there are 365 days and 6 hours, which means there is a difference of exactly 10 days, 21 hours, and 204 chalakim. Now, this difference, in 1 year you have a difference of close to 11 days. As the years go by, you're going to have a problem. Because as years go by, that means that the seasons will change according to the Hebrew calendar. We must have Pesach come out in the spring season. If you have a difference of 11 days, in 3 years' time, Pesach will come out much earlier. It will come out in the wintertime. So therefore, we must see that these two are coordinated, the lunar and solar years, to maintain the proper time of the season. And that's why we have the Ibur Shona, our leap year, which means an additional month. A year of 13 months, and enough times so that both lunar and solar years will coincide. Now we have today meaning recently, since the time of the Gemara, since the time of the Churban, destruction of the Holy Temple, we have a set pattern, a calendar whereby we consider the Machzor Lavona, the cycle of the moon. That's a cycle of 19 years. In this 19-year cycle, we have exactly 7 leap years. The 19-year cycle, in every 19-year cycle, the 3rd year, the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, the 14th, the 17th, and the 19th. Those 7 years of the cycle are leap years, and we have 13 months. The 13th month is always the month of Adar Sheni, so that Purim will always be 30 days before Pesach. Now, that's in order to have these two coincide. However, it's today. When we had the Beis HaMikdash, we had the Sanhedrin, then we could not establish a leap year except through the guidance of the Nasi, that's the chief rabbi of the Sanhedrin, and a group of rabbis. This required 7 rabbis. A besdin, a court of 7 rabbis, who would proclaim the coming year as a leap year. There must be 7, but the Gemara says now that these 7 had to be invited the day before. if a rabbi was not invited, no matter how great he was, how great an authority he was, he could not take part in this proclamation, this ritual, whereby they proclaimed the following year as a leap year. Well, the Gemara tells us a story of Rabbon Gamliel. Rabbon means chief rabbi of the Sanhedrin. Gamliel, who told his messenger, tomorrow morning prepare 7 rabbis to go up to the top of the Beis HaMedrash, top of the court, so that we will have the ceremony for proclaiming a leap year. The next morning, Rabbi Gamliel came to the court, and he found a total of 8 rabbis there. Now, this, of course, is illegal. If you have one who is not invited, he cannot be part of the ceremony. Rabbi Gamliel said, he who was not invited, he who came here without permission, should step down. Among the rabbis seated there was Shmuel HaKoton. Shmuel HaKoton, Shmuel the small. He was called the small because he was the most modest, the most humble of the rabbis, and also one of the holiest. So, his modesty, he stood up and said, I came without permission. But I did not come as part of the ceremony. I came only because I wanted to learn the laws about this, so I know what the dinim are, perhaps for some future time. Rabbi Gamliel said to him, sit down, please, because I know how great you are. I wish that all the years that we proclaim as leap years should be done through you and ones like you. But I couldn't help it, because the law is that you cannot proclaim a leap year except through those who are invited before. However, sit down now, remain seated. You may stay. This is the end of the story, which teaches us, of course, the modesty of Shmuel HaKoton. Naturally, he was one of those who was invited. The reason he stood up was he wanted to avoid embarrassment for the person who was not invited, who would now be put to shame. Now, before we go further, to display a still further case in how a person should see to it not to embarrass someone, questions that arise here are obvious. First place, why did Rabbi Gamliel say to his messenger, invite 7 rabbis? He would be there too. You need 7, which means he should have said invite 6. So why the additional 1? Secondly, he found 8. He did not find 8 ordinary people. He did not find 7 great rabbis and 1 ordinary person. All those assembled were great rabbis. How did one of them come without being invited when every person knows the law is that it's done only if a person is invited, a rabbi is invited previously? How did that one additional one dare to come in? Third question is about Shmuel HaKoton himself. Of what avail was it, or what benefit was it if he'd get up and say, I'm the guilty one, I'm leaving? Fine, he might spare the other person embarrassment, but he's going to cause a lot of confusion by walking out and then having the year proclaimed a leap year illegally, because then he's certainly leaving over one of those who was not invited. The result will be illegal Ibur Shana, which means that the whole year will become a confusion, holidays in the wrong times and so on. Why was this issue settled so quickly and so easily when it seems that we are left with a big question mark? Nothing is settled here. The answer the Mefarshim say is that, of course, Rabbi Gamliel naturally invited 6. He told his messenger, see that there are 7 rabbis tomorrow. His messenger misunderstood and thought that Rabbi Gamliel meant, see there are 7 aside from himself. It was the fault of the messenger who made the error in inviting 7 additional ones rather than Gamliel. Meanwhile, though, the 7 that came were properly invited and could act in this ceremony, because the din is you must have 7 minimum. If you have 8 or 9, of course, it's still good, if they were all invited. Rabbi Gamliel was unaware of the fact that he had invited 7. He thought the messenger understood his order, that had invited 6, and the 7th one came without permission. And so therefore he announced that one that came without permission should leave. Shmuel HaKatan, knowing also that all 7 had been invited, rose and said, I am the guilty one, I will leave. If he had left, there'd be no problem, no trouble. The fact that he did it, Gamliel understood by his saying that if there'd be one who was not invited, Shmuel HaKatan would not have done that. Therefore, this was a sign that all the other 7 were invited, and therefore the ceremony could go on as planned with all 8 of them. Now the Gemara says that Shmuel HaKatan was not the only person who ever performed an act of such a commendable type. So commendable in the sense of having pity, consideration for a person and avoiding his embarrassment. Gemara says that Rebbe, that Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Nachman, once was teaching a class when he suddenly detected a very foul odor of garlic in the room. This disturbed him very much. He could not teach. He could not lecture. So he announced the one that ate garlic should please leave. Rabbi Chia was the greatest rabbi next to Rabbi Yehuda, stood up and walked out. As soon as he walked out, the rest of the students all rose and followed him. And so the class was completely disrupted. In the morning, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rebbe, approached Rabbi Chia and said to him very bitterly, you are the one who hurt the feelings of my father. Rabbi Nachman, you came and you ate garlic in the room, you caused him a displeasure. Rabbi Chia said, Chas v'sholom, but nothing ever be said like that. I would never do anything against the feelings of Rebbe. It was only that it was someone else. I would not allow the other person to leave first and have him embarrassed. I wanted to take his place to save him from embarrassment. I would have done so gladly if it meant my being embarrassed myself. But the other students who saw me walk out, in order to spare me embarrassment, they all walked out too. And they learned from me to spare me embarrassment, to spare the guilty person embarrassment, because if I'd walked out, the odor of garlic would still have remained. So therefore, they all followed me, so that one person who was guilty of eating garlic would be saved. The Gemara says this was still not the only case. Where did this originate from? We find that further back, time Reb Meir, was a story with a woman who came to the yeshiva of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was a generation before Rabbi Nachman. And she said to Rabbi Meir, you have a class of students, allegedly great rabbis. Well, I come to report that one of these rabbis, one of your students, has dealt with me in a very unrefined manner. And therefore, according to what he has done, I consider myself married to him. Because that act in itself could constitute marriage as well as giving a ring to a woman. And therefore, I am married to one of your students. But Meir said, do you know which one? And apparently she was in doubt. The Meir said, fine. I want you to come inside and accept a divorce from your husband. Since you are married, accept the divorce. She sat down. The Meir wrote out a get, a divorce, with his name on it. He said, here you are, you're now divorced from this person who committed this foul deed with you. I admit it, I'm the one that did it. Then, the rest of the students all wrote out a get, also a divorce for this woman, that now she was legally divorced from whoever it was, but no one was able to detect the one that had committed that act. But Meir put himself to shame as the rabbi of that group, accepted his shame first, and thereby spared the student who committed this act from embarrassment. Which means, the Gemara says, that even we know, of course, this was not done, we could not take the woman's word for it. It was not done deliberately. There was no harm intended, or perhaps the entire act did not take place. But if it had taken place, and if a worse crime than this had taken place, the Gemara says that it is far worse to embarrass a person publicly even than the worst sin that exists, the sin of adultery. So much worse is embarrassing a person publicly, and therefore Reb Meir accepted a shame upon himself to spare one of his students this embarrassment. The Gemara says, let us go up. Where did they get this from? Where did these rabbis learn this quality of mercy and consideration from? The Gemara goes back to former generations in the time of Ezra, different cases. And finally, the Gemara says we can learn this from Hashem himself. A posek in the Chumash. When Hashem performed the miracle for the Jews of the desert of having the mon, the heavenly food, come down to them, each day they'd go out and collect this mon, which would serve as nourishment for all Jews in the desert. However, Hashem warned them, on the sixth day there will be double the amount of this mon, nothing on the seventh day. The seventh day is Shabbos Kodesh. There will be no mon at that time. Therefore, be sure that you collect, that you gather up Lechem Mishnah, double the amount on Friday, to supply you for the Shabbos too. Then the Chumash tells us that there were people who were evil. They went out on Shabbos. They did not believe that there was no mon then. They went out on Shabbos to seek the mon, and they could not find it. This angered heaven. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, how long is it? Till when will you refuse, all of you, all you Jews? How long will you refuse to believe in the word of Hashem? When will you finally learn to have faith in the word of Hashem? Now this, addressing the entire Jewish people, when only a few were guilty, would imply that all were guilty, or, as the case was intended by Hashem to avoid embarrassing the guilty parties. We see even Hashem is careful in seeing that the person who is guilty even is not embarrassed, because embarrassment is the worst possible crime. Of course, heaven does embarrass a person. The Gemara says that a person who commits a sin hiddenly, he tries to hide, not to be seen, and from heaven it is brought out publicly to put this person to shame. But this statement by Hashem was done as a lesson to teach midos, quality of mercy, to the Jews from then on. That a person must learn the feelings of his fellow Jew should be regarded with as much consideration as his own feelings. And this was the lesson that Hillel taught to the Ger when he said the entire Torah is based on that one statement, that never consider a second person less than yourself. Consider this person just as important as yourself. And to this statement, Rabbi Akiva said that's a klal godol b'Torah. The most important rule in the Torah is the ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Your love for a fellow Jew should be the same as you like yourself. This, Ben Azai said, Yerushalmi, I disagree with Rabbi Akiva, because I say that a person should consider his fellow Jew in all cases, at all times. Any person might say, I don't mind being slapped. I don't mind being hurt. I don't mind being insulted. And if I don't mind being insulted, I am permitted to insult my friend. I wouldn't do to him what I don't care being done to wouldn't like being done to myself. But if I don't mind being insulted, I can insult that person too. Therefore, Ben Azai says this rule is not sufficient. There's a much more important rule, Zeh Sefer Toldos Adam, which means that a person was created in the image of Hashem. You must regard a person as sacred just as you do the Shekhinah. You must consider a person's feelings, not to insult, not to hurt a person, just as you would never dare to say a word against the Shekhinah, against the Spirit of Hashem. This is the basic rule of the Torah, and this is what the Gemara teaches us here that we should know. The Torah is divided into two equal parts. We have the laws that pertain to a man's duty to Hashem, laws like Shabbos, Tefillin, Tzitzis, and holidays, which have no effect upon his fellow Jew. And we have the second half of the Torah, Ben Adam Lachavero, which means rules that apply to a fellow Jew. It's these rules that the Hebrew courts must take care of, Hebrew courts must tend to, and that's why we have a set of rules for judges to be honest and just. And with the compliance to these rules, to show an Ahavas Yisrael, the same measure as Ahavas Hashem, Hashem will then give us back His Ava, will lead us to our ultimate Geula, redemption of Yerushalmi and HaKodesh, all of Eretz Yisrael, Vias Moshiach Tikuney, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, Me'edav Yameinu, Amen, V'Yamein.